Number 5. The Pheonix Lights. If you ask most people what the most famous UFO sighting in the world was, they might say the Roswell, New Mexico incident. It's definitely the most referenced in pop culture. There's a CW TV show about it that's had like 10 seasons. Roswell is almost synonymous with the concept of flying saucers. But the most documented UFO sighting occurred in 1997 in Phoenix, Arizona, when a series of bright lights in the sky were seen together by hundreds of people. Okay? This isn't just some passing dot, this was something hundreds of people corroborated on. Now, like any good UFO sighting, there's no real concrete answer as to what happened, and only speculation to go on. So let's run through the facts. It was on March 13, 1997. Hundreds of people around Phoenix described seeing these vivid, bright lights, around 6 or 7 total. Now, reports claim that these mysterious lights were huge and big enough that they were blocking out your vision of the clouds, the stars, but they wouldn't produce any noise like a jet or a helicopter or anything. Big, blocky, silent. A few hours later on that same night, a second wave of sightings came over the city, describing a long trail of blinking objects that some said was a mile long and boomerang shaped. They were blinking in regular intervals, orange and blue lights. Air traffic controllers reported seeing these lights, but didn't detect any planes on the radar. And the air traffic controllers described this incident as inexplicable. But maybe the strangest part about all this, maybe just to me, is that the first person who called in the sighting was legendary 80s mullet owner and actor Kurt Russell, who was flying into the city with his son. Snake Plissken asked what the strange lights hovering over the city was, leading to Kurt Russell calling it in. The only thing he got back from air traffic control was, "We don't show anything." Now, officially, the military would claim that this was a test for high-intensity flares, but eyewitnesses weren't so convinced. The governor of Arizona at the time, who was a former Air Force officer, claimed that the aircrafts he saw that day didn't resemble anything he had ever seen in his life. So, what happened in Arizona that day? Was it a widespread enough hoax, government cover-up, or proof of life from beyond the stars? You tell me. And if you're looking for more UFO videos, you already know we have got that and then some. Click on through to the channel, we've literally got hundreds of UFO videos. You could be watching them for the rest of the evening. But if UFO stuff ain't your jam, we've got cryptids, conspiracies, true crime, fake crime, pretty much anything you could want. So hit subscribe, hit that little bell, and don't miss a single thing. But do it at the end of this video, would you kindly? We got way more UFO sightings coming up for you. Number 4. Japanese Flight 1268. Our next sighting comes to us out of Japan. Well, the skies of Japan. It's a video about flying objects after all. It was in November of 1986 when a pilot on a cargo flight thought that he made a close encounter of the third kind. When Captain Kenju Terauchi and a skeleton crew were flying a cargo delivery of some fancy bougie French wines into Japan, when Captain Terauchi claims he saw shining bright lights surrounding both wings of the plane. Now, initially, Terauchi said at the time he thought that this was just US flown fighter jets patrolling around the border of the Soviet Union. But when he got a decent look at the craft, he realized these weren't friends of Uncle Sam. He said, "2 spaceships stopped in front of our face, shooting off bright lights." He continued saying, "The inside of the cockpit shined brightly, and I felt warm in the face." These aircraft in particular were described as being cuboid, I guess they're Borg ships, with jet propulsion systems clustered around a dark center. At the same time that these unidentified objects were soaring by the plane, these objects seemed like they were jamming the plane's communications in some way, as Terauchi and the crew couldn't contact ground control at all during the sighting, as if there was some electromagnetic field. The rest of the crew, however, wasn't quite as convinced by this strange encounter, with the co-pilot and flight engineer believing that the objects they saw were not but strange lights, and agreed that they were definitely unexplained and they couldn't find a reasonable possibility for what they were, but that they didn't necessarily think they were flying saucers. A committee looking into the phenomena claims that it was just light refraction through ice crystals suspended in the clouds, but that doesn't quite explain how the cockpit got warm or anything like that, or where the communications were going. So what do you think? Aliens or ice crystals? Number 3. The Betty and Barney Hill Incident. It's sad how many people see a UFO and no one else in the entire world will believe them. You know, not their friends, not their family. That's why this case is different. A young married couple claims that not only they saw a UFO together, but they were abducted together. That's one for the memory books. You know, they say the couple that probes together stays together. It's a fairly well documented case. It even served as the inspiration behind the alien abduction story in American Horror Story Asylum. And how about Evan Peters, huh? Love that guy. Anyway, the real story revolved around around Barney and Betty Hill in 1961. The two of them were driving home through New Hampshire when they both saw a blinding bright light flying above them in the sky. Betty started to feel dizzy, and the two of them soon found themselves asleep on the road. A moment passed, and they found themselves parked in their driveway 2 full hours later, not remembering a second of what had happened. The couple claimed that they had traveled to a star system 39 light years away called Zeta Reticuli. The two had connections and were able to get in contact with Air Force officials to report their strange sighting, and would spend the next few years trying to explain their case to anyone who would listen in the desperate hopes of getting some help and some answers. Barney would meet with a psychiatrist regularly who he told that he kept having nightmares where he was being operated on by small gray-skinned, slanted-eyed creatures that would take samples of his skin, his fingernails, his flesh to do with he did not know. So the psychiatrist had him undergo hypnosis therapy, his wife as well, hoping perhaps that something repressed could be unearthed, and maybe they should have left it alone, because what they found was terrifying. When going under hypnosis and waking back up, Betty was able to draw a scientifically accurate map of the star system from memory, creating a map that was nearly spot on to the real Zeta Reticuli. This incident inspired the Air Force to launch Project Blue Book to collect more stories of UFO abductions like this. Number 2. Kenneth Arnold. If you've ever wondered why flying saucers became the default term for UFOs as opposed to something like flying cigars or flying triangles, it has a very large part to do with this next story, which was one of the first big mainstream sightings of a UFO in 1947. Now interestingly, possibly coincidentally, possibly not, this incident occurred only a few weeks before the infamous Roswell, New Mexico incident, so UFO fever was just on the brain around 1947. This happened to Kenneth Arnold, a clean-cut all-American aviator. He was flying a small private plane over Washington around Mount Rainier on a scavenger hunt of sorts for the wreckage of a downed plane, which had a fairly significant reward offered by the Army for its salvage, which Kenneth was after, of course. While he was prospecting, Arnold claims to have seen nine blinding bright flashes of light, flying in a bizarre pattern like the tail of a kite. Described as saucers moving at an incredible speed, Arnold tried to do his level best to assess what these things were from the seat of his aircraft, working out how fast they were moving, taking his watch and clocking from when they reached the peak of the mountain. He worked out that they were going about 1,700 miles per hour, which is pretty darn fast considering in 1947 humans had just broken the sound barrier at 700 miles per hour, and that was an unbelievable leap in technology. Whatever it was Kenneth saw, it was something far more advanced than anything he'd ever seen on Earth. When he'd landed, he told the crew at the airport about everything that he'd seen, suggesting that he'd seen missiles or maybe some experimental new tech. For weeks after, Arnold would become a media darling, being interviewed by several reporters, all hoping to get the big scoop on this. Part of what made this such a defining UFO story for the American people was how earnest Arnold was about his story. He was an honest man who provided straightforward facts, experience with aviation, a mathematical and rational approach to all of this, and very little in the way of wild speculation. Which is a shame, because I love wild speculation. Let's do a little more wild speculating with our last point. Number 1. The Betty Cash Incident. In December 29, 1980, Betty Cash would see something on the outskirts of Houston near Dayton that would change the course of her life forever. She was driving with her friend, Vicki Landrum, and Landrum's grandson. At around 9 p.m., the three of them noticed a blinding bright light in the sky. Landrum believed it to be the second coming of Jesus, whereas Betty Cash described it like this. We didn't know what it was, but we knew that it was something lighting up the sky. We all began to feel this heat, and all of a sudden Vicki screamed for me to stop. And when I stopped, she went forward, and her handprint was embedded into the dashboard of the car. And I thought, well, I've got to see what this is. So I got out, I walked towards the front of the car, and I stood there looking up to try and figure out what this object was, and then a diamond-shaped object appeared with flames shooting out. The heat was tremendous. When I reached for the door handle, it was so hot I couldn't even begin to open it. The only thing I was thinking while all this was happening was, are we gonna make it out of this alive? Landrum stated that moments later, a large squadron of black helicopters took over the sky above the area. After the choppers cleared, Betty took the Landrums home and retired for the night. The next morning, Miss Cash said she was extremely sick, suffering from nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, weakness, and intense burning in her eyes. Now bizarrely, Landrum and her grandson all reported the same symptoms. These symptoms would worsen pretty seriously, with large blisters forming on the skin, and eventually Betty Cash had to be taken to a hospital where she was suffering from cancer symptoms, where she lost large patches of skin and clumps of hair. Now, to date, there has never been a conclusive answer to what happened to Cash and Landrum. What caused the radiation sickness? Was it the military testing new technology? Was it a craft from another world?
I'm just gonna call this first sighting or series of sightings February 2023. February was quite a month for unidentified flying objects, and I wanted to start this list off with these sightings because of how recent they are. They may not be as definitive or weird as some of the other sightings on this list, but these were pretty high profile stories, and it's always far more interesting when the government is involved in these things. Just adds another layer of credibility to it. Not that the government doesn't lie or withhold information about things, I think we all know that that happens, but the fact that it's being reported on so heavily means it's pretty big news. So the story here is that several mysterious high altitude objects were shot down in February of 2023 over various airspaces. We had objects being spotted in Canada, United States, Latin America, China, Eastern Europe. It started when several unidentified objects were shot down over Alaska, the Yukon, and Lake Huron. The general of NORAD, Glenn D. Van Herk, made a statement saying the objects could be benign, but it wasn't 100% sure. When asked if they could be of alien origin, though, that's the question we're all digging to ask, he said he just wasn't ruling anything out. I'm just interested by this. It really seems like the government and military agencies are starting to become more open to the idea of extraterrestrial life, or maybe some of them already are fully aware of their presence. Either way, though, it seems like it's being discussed more. It's not being written off as nonsense like it has been in the past. So just that aspect alone is interesting to me. Now, here's another interesting thing about these cases. There were recovery attempts made, to find these objects that had plummeted towards the Earth. Unfortunately, they all landed in areas that aren't all that accessible, so it made for a pretty difficult recovery process, and the missions were pretty soon abandoned. Now, that's what they say, but what if the government actually did recover something that they just aren't ready or even willing to show us? Could be the case. You never know. Next up, we have the Oumuamua. Oumuamua, that's a hard word to say. I'm gonna try not to say it too many times on here. Old news with this one, right? It's that weird cylindrical object that was spotted flying through space. It's definitely been talked about plenty of times, including on this channel, I'm sure, but it's a recent article dated March 7th of this year that I'm referring to here. So, like I said before, I think when the government, military, or academics get involved with UFO type stories, it just makes it far more interesting to me. Not that I'd totally disregard some farmer in Ohio saying he was probed by a little gray, bug-eyed alien, but I don't know, people like attention sometimes. And a recent article written by Sean Kirkpatrick, head of the Pentagon's AARO, or All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which specializes in unidentified flying objects, and a Harvard professor named Avi Loeb, they discussed the possibility that objects such as Oumuamua, spotted back in 2017, could be of alien origin. So pretty exciting. I mean, these are two learned, intelligent people writing an official document theorizing the possibility of alien life. I mean, that's just cool. The article does say, however, that the objects, like the Oumuamua, could be, quote, a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth. So probes observing Earth could be good or bad or neutral, depending on whether you're a glass half empty or half full type person. Now, they didn't just discuss that object, they were looking at a variety of unidentified objects or probes, and they wanted to speculate that these crafts could potentially power their batteries from starlights, and that maybe Earth's water could be fuel. It's pretty wild stuff, and yes, a lot of it is speculative, but the fact that a highly respected scientist that spent 20 years studying physics is proposing these ideas, pretty fascinating. Something I also want to mention about people who are just very very skeptical about aliens even showing any interest at all in Earth. You know, you'll hear them say stuff like, well, extraterrestrial beings with all this advanced technology, they just wouldn't be interested in anything we're doing. It'd be like, you know, God observing ants or something. And who's to say, first of all, that God doesn't like observing ants? And, you know, even if that is the case, I mean, like, how can you really know that for sure? How on earth could we possibly know what beings from another planet are interested in? We don't know what kind of hobbies they have. It's also kind of counters their other argument, because it's like, yeah, spacefaring extraterrestrials would be leagues ahead of us in terms of intelligence, but I know what they're thinking. I know what they like. Just doesn't make any sense. The Texas Zoo creature. So we take a look at a lot of UFOs on this channel, so I thought I'd change it up a bit and take a look at a bizarre looking creature instead. This picture was taken just 1 year ago, back in May of 2022. It was taken by a security camera at a zoo in Amarillo, Texas at around 1:30 a.m. A bizarre figure was spotted on a security camera, and before you say it's just a lion on its hind legs, which would also be pretty freaky, mind you, this figure was outside of the zoo, so it's not one of the animals unless one of them escaped. Now, why am I putting this on an alien list? A lot of people think it looks like a werewolf or Sonic the Hedgehog or something, but I don't know. To me, it looks pretty alien. Look at the elongated back part of the head. It almost looks like a xenomorph from Alien or something. Plus, I find the presence of alien life to be far, far more likely than werewolves or other kinds of fantasy-based creatures like that. I mean, like, who knows, but there's a lot of unexplored space out there and a lot of explored space here on Earth. I think we'd have spotted a werewolf by now if they existed. There's also a big chance that this could just be a trick of the camera. Security footage can be kind of janky sometimes, or perhaps we have a zoo prankster on our hands, or maybe this is a super deformed person. If that's the case, I hope they're okay. Regardless though, this is an odd figure to see in the middle of the night outside of a Texas zoo. And trust me, I know my Texas zoos. The Wales UFO. I didn't know this, but it turns out there are a lot of UFO sightings in Wales. I don't know what the aliens' fascination is with Wales, but reports date all the way back to the 1940s. Actually, all the way back to the 12th century, but I don't know if I give much credence to stuff dating back that far. Apparently, religious pilgrims believed to have seen a fire-breathing dragon erupt from the sea and fly into the sky. Could have been a UFO and they just didn't know what to make of it and just called it a dragon, but anyway, way off topic. The UFO in question here was spotted back in September of 2016 by a police helicopter at around 9 p.m. It was only visible on the chopper's thermal camera and seemed to be moving at a speed of 106 miles per hour over the Bristol Channel. Full video of the footage was released by a former cop, Gary Hasseltine, who has been urging the UK government to come forward and reveal what they know about UFOs. What's also interesting about this one is that the object was moving against the wind, so it is or was being operated one way or another. It's not like it was some object caught up in a wind current or something. Police also stated years after the event that it could have possibly been a drone, but they were struggling to keep up with it, so it'd have to be a pretty fast one. There are drones that reach that 100-mile-per-hour speed, but they're pretty high-end. Your common drones clock in at around 45 to 70 miles per hour, so again, who knows, but it's possible. And coming in at our number one spot, we have aliens in Bolivia. I wanted to finish off with this one because we have reports of both your typical UFO sighting and reports of actual aliens being spotted here, so we're getting some real bang for your buck with this one. The story just happened back in March of this year, and it all started when residents of a small village in the La Paz area of Bolivia claimed to have spotted a mysterious green light in the sky. A bunch of people pulled out their phones and started filming. They were in absolute awe and said it looked to be some kind of alien spacecraft. And then 2 days later, little people were spotted running around the town at night. One villager named Rita Marquez reported to news outlets describing the creatures as little, almost like goblins, and is quoted saying they were miniature beings, like those little people who appear to children. And it felt like something creepy was happening, like they were welcoming their friends, you know? Now, I'm not sure exactly what she means by that, but it's definitely odd. This bizarre situation all culminated with several residents claiming to have found one of the small creatures curled up dead in a gutter one morning, the body of which soon vanished. So we clearly have a lot going on here. Weird lights in the sky, possibly even an aircraft spotted, little beings running around the streets at night, a dead one, unfortunately. It's all pretty weird, and sure, it's possible it's just a hoax or even maybe mass hysteria, but there's also a good chance that it isn't. I love stories like this where there are multiple witnesses. Again, it adds another layer of credibility to the whole thing, because obviously it's a lot harder to organize a hoax and get multiple people involved. People talk, they let secrets out. Another interesting thing about this one is that authorities did get involved and told the villagers to kind of stay hushed about the whole incident, so maybe they just thought everyone was nuts and didn't want to spread misinformation, but perhaps there is something going on here that they need to cover up for one reason or another. Either way though, something happened. Are they among us? We may soon find out.
Starting off this list in our number 5 spot, we have Project Grudge Report 13. Okay, so I've read quite a few different UFO sighting stories and stories of alleged alien abductions, and this is fully one of the most terrifying that I have ever heard of. So basically, the story starts off in March of 1956 when Air Force Sergeant Jonathan P. Lovett was assisting Major William Cunningham in the White Sands Missile Testing Grounds near Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The pair were out searching for debris from a recent rocket test when Major Cunningham heard a loud scream. His first thought was that Sergeant Lovett had been bitten by a snake, so he went around to help aid his partner when he allegedly saw something he never expected. He recounted seeing the sergeant being dragged away by some sort of long serpentine arm that had wrapped around his legs. Whatever this creature was, it was connected to a hovering silver disc that was in the air about 15 feet away. The major stood there in horror as he watched this creature and the sergeant retreat into the craft, which then rose vertically into the sky. Of course, he radioed for help, and while he was taken to the hospital for observation, search teams were sent out immediately. It wouldn't happen until 3 days later that they would find the body of Sergeant Lovett, only 10 miles from the site where he was said to have disappeared from. The autopsy performed on him later also only raised more questions than answers, as his body was severely harmed. So of course there was an investigation that happened, and many people claim this investigation was detailed in a 600-page document labeled Project Grudge Report 13. But the problem with this is that no official information on Report 13 exists, and the US government denies its very existence. Though Grudge Reports 1 through 12 have been declassified along with Report 14, no official mention or accounting of Report 13 exists, and the story solely relies on secondhand accounts of the horrible incident. In our number 4 spot today, we have the cigar-shaped UFO. Okay, so let's set the stage. It's 2:45 a.m. on July 24th, 1948, and there are 20 passengers aboard a twin-engine propeller plane that is at 5,000 feet, being flown from Houston to Atlanta by pilot Clarence S. Childs and co-pilot John B. Whitted. Out of the 20 passengers on board, 19 of them are asleep at these early morning hours, and everything seems to be going as per usual until it wasn't. The 2 pilots and the 1 passenger who was awake all witnessed the same thing about 20 miles southeast of Montgomery, Alabama. About a week after the incident, the pilot explained what he had seen by saying, quote, "It was clear there were no wings present, that it was powered by some jet or other type of power shooting flame from the rear some 50 feet. There were 2 rows of windows which indicated an upper and a lower deck, and from inside these windows a very bright light was glowing. Underneath the ship there was a blue glow of light. By his estimates, he watched the UFO for about 10 seconds before it completely vanished." The co-pilot gave a similar explanation and also added, quote, "The object was cigar-shaped and seemed to be about 100 feet in length. The fuselage appeared to be about 3 times the circumference of a B-29 fuselage. It had 2 rows of windows, an upper and a lower. The windows were very large and seemed square. They were white with light, which seemed to be caused by some type of combustion. I asked Captain Childs what we had just seen, and he said that he didn't know." Well, this is obviously all very strange and peculiar. What has driven UFO enthusiasts even more is the fact that this strange sighting was of course later investigated by the US government, but the results of that investigation have allegedly been mostly destroyed. Does that mean that they found something they aren't willing to share yet? Some believe that perhaps the pilots and the passenger witnessed a secret Soviet spy craft, while others believe it was definitely something of the extraterrestrial variety. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Lubbock Incident. On August 25th, 1951, in Lubbock, Texas, a group of scientists from the Texas Technical College were all hanging out in the backyard of geology professor Dr. W.I. Robinson. They were all just chilling, enjoying each other's company, until around 9:20 p.m. when they saw something very strange. It was a V-shaped formation of 15 to 30 bluish-green lights passing overhead. They were completely confused over what it could be, but figured that the lights would likely reappear, which they did. About an hour later, the lights reappeared, and at this point, all of these scientists knew that they had witnessed something exceptionally interesting, but what was it? The scientists weren't the only ones to witness the lights either. About 350 miles away in Albuquerque, New Mexico, an employee of the Atomic Energy Commission's top secret Sandia Corporation, who had a high-level Q security clearance, had been sitting outside with his wife, quote, gazing at the night sky, commenting on how beautiful it was, when both of them were startled at the sight of a huge airplane flying swiftly and silently over their home. On the aft edge of the wings, there were 6 to 8 pairs of soft, glowing bluish lights. There were more sightings as well, all reporting a similar thing. The group of scientists began investigating, tracking the lights, which they witnessed 12 more times. They measured the angle of the lights, they tracked the speed, and they attempted, unsuccessfully, to try and measure the UFO's altitude. Here's the deal with this though. The government did end up investigating, but the official explanation for these lights is the most cryptic message I've ever seen. It read, quote, I thought that the professor's lights might have been some kind of birds reflecting the light from mercury vapor streetlights, but I was wrong. They weren't birds. They weren't refracted light, but they weren't spaceships. The lights that the professor saw have been positively identified as a very commonplace and easily explainable natural phenomena. I can't divulge exactly the way the answer was found because it is an interesting story of how a scientist set up complete instrumentation to track down the lights. Telling the story would lead to his identity, and in exchange for his story, I promised the man complete anonymity. Despite people claiming that the mystery has been solved, by this explanation, people are left with a lot more questions than answers. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Shag Harbor Incident. This UFO encounter is often referred to as Canada's Roswell, so I was shocked that I hadn't heard of it before. Basically, this incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange at the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing the object. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy, he saw 4 blips on his Decca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and that is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some of his friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet off of the shore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP, but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. But it was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for, so what could have all these witnesses seen? Since they have never officially identified what it was in the official Government of Canada documents, it is listed as a UFO. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Westall Incident. Taking it back to 1966, we have the largest mass UFO sighting in Australia that at the time was largely ignored. This incident took place when over 300 students and staff staff members of a school in Melbourne all witnessed multiple UFOs silently flying through the air before they landed in a nearby field. Well, there's been a ton of speculation about this incident in the many years in. One witness account stands out among the rest, and that is the account made by the science teacher from the school, Andrew Greenwood. He was alerted to the UFO event by a hysterical student, and when he went outside to see for himself, everything changed. Previously a skeptic of UFO stories, Andrew's mind was abruptly changed when he saw, as he described it, a round silver object about the size of a car with a metal rod sticking up in the air. He went on to explain that suddenly 5 planes came and surrounded the object, all while more people were gathering to watch. He called what happened next the most amazing flying he has ever seen, explaining that, quote, every time they got too close to the object it would slowly accelerate, then rapidly accelerate, and then move away from them and stop. Then they would take off after it again, and the same thing would happen. This went on for about 20 minutes before the mysterious object just vanished. As weird as this all was, what was almost weirder was what happened next. Firstly, the headmaster of the school is said to have tried to put a stop to anyone talking about the incident at all, threatening severe punishment to any student or staff who was caught speaking about it, and when the Royal Australian Air Force contacted him, he refused to talk to them at all about it. There have also been stories of witnesses getting visits from people warning them not to speak of the incident. Andrew explained, quote, when he asked the physical education teacher to describe what she had seen herself so that he could compare it with his own observation, she just wouldn't say anything. Another witness who did talk to Andrew and described what she had seen in great detail, just 30 minutes later refused to speak to him and wouldn't say a word. Was this because of the threats from the headmaster, or was something else going on here? This is definitely one strange UFO story that leaves behind a lot of questions.
Number 5. Well, first and foremost, if you were looking for any proof that the government definitely knows more about aliens than they let on, how about from the mouth of the 3-letter organizations themselves? The CIA released a tweet in 2014, wow, obviously was meant to be taken in a joking manner, but still pretty illuminating, saying that throughout the 50s and 60s, they estimate that 50% of all sightings of unexplained aerial phenomena and UFOs were simply the CIA testing new aircraft. Out of context, the CIA admits they were behind 50% of all UFO sightings is an extremely attention-grabbing headline, and probably what I should have named this video. Would have got you to click better. And it is an attention-grabbing headline. At the time they were testing the Lockheed U-2 spy plane, codenamed Dragon Lady, which was able to fly at altitudes thought unreachable by a one-manned aircraft at the time. We know the CIA will always be a little bit more technologically advanced than they're willing to let on. That's just the nature of shadowy governments. But the conspiracy theorist in me has to wonder, is it even just the littlest bit possible that them releasing this could be a misinformation campaign? I mean, this is just what they're willing to admit, right? Who's to say what they won't admit? What if they put stuff like this out there so the next time you see something odd in the sky, you just dismiss it thinking, oh, that's just the CIA testing airplanes, instead of the more logical, reasonable answer that it's an alien spacecraft observing you from up above? And what if all I'm saying is just wild speculating and tinfoil hat level conspiracies because I'm trying to get views on video? It's more likely than you think. But them admitting they're responsible for most UFO sightings intones to me that they're aware of a lot more UFO sightings that are reported. Makes you wonder how much they research them all. Do you think they look at every blurry cell phone camera video posted to Reddit, or just the really serious ones that make the news? I'm hoping to get some answers someday, and I have a feeling that some of those answers are in this video. It won't all be wild speculation, I promise. And hey, if you want to see more alien stuff, click through. We've got boxes full of declassified documents, NASA stories, and videos that are just out of this world. Get it? So stay subscribed and stay scared, and I'll see you there. Number 4, the Guy Hoddle memo. So it's a pretty much an open book secret that the 3-letter agencies have known about aliens in some way or another since they've started writing things down. They don't hide it or pretend to hide it anymore, which is nice. They finally admitted that Area 51 even exists for the first time a couple years ago, so we could all use a little openness in our day-to-day. Let's take a look at one of the FBI's most talked about and most viewed documents, the Guy Hoddle memo. And despite being one of the most seen FBI memos, it's but a single-page document that was never followed up on. Well, it sounds like we should follow up on it. Guy Hoddle was the head of the FBI field office in Washington, and his report was addressed to the head of the FBI, one J. Edgar Hoover. The contents of the report were simple, but shocking. It detailed the descriptive encounter of an agent making a physical sighting of what they believed to be a UFO. It's dated 3 years after the Roswell incident, but it was reported in New Mexico for what it's worth. Here's a quote from the memo. The saucers were described as being circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied occupied by 3 bodies of human shape but only 3 feet tall, dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture. Each body was bandaged in a manner similar to blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. Now if you ask me, that is almost too perfect, isn't it? I mean, the memo lines up nearly perfectly with the stereotypical cartoon description of aliens being little gray or green men flying around in flying saucers around New Mexico. The memo goes on to read that the agent claims they had found the saucers because an FBI high-powered radar in the area had detected it, and this radar detecting it had interfered with the controlling mechanism of the crafts. But despite all of this, which really seems like it's the paper trail screaming, proving, hey, aliens are out there, you should go check them out, the memo ends by saying no further evaluation was attempted, and the HODL memo was never followed up on, presumably crumpled up and thrown away. Director Hoover, I guess, thought it wasn't worth his time and disregarded it, leaving it now as nothing more than an incredibly odd piece of history. Number 3. Project Blue Book. Well, here's the thing. Even if Director Hoover at the FBI didn't see fit to look into the HODL memo, there were definitely other organizations that were looking into UFOs. Maybe it's not just the FBI, but I can tell you that the Air Force sure was. If you're an experienced UFO enthusiast, perhaps you're already very familiar with Project Blue Book, but if you're not, hey, let's talk about it. The project was officially started in 1952 and terminated in 1969. And the project had 2 main goals. 1. Confirm if UFOs were a threat to national security. And 2. Scientifically analyze any UFO-related data. Well, that seems like pretty strong evidence to me. Not that the project existed to see if UFOs are real, but rather to determine if they were a threat. That seems like they're writing and admitting no, we know, we just want to know if they're scary. And is that not the most human sentiment you've ever heard? If you guys learned nothing from Avatar, we gotta be making friends with aliens, not being afraid of them. In the years of Project Blue Book's operations, a stunning 12,618 reports were filed and collected. And those are just the ones that are officially recorded. Of those, interestingly, there were an individual 700 reports that were found to be unexplainable after research and intense analysis. Isn't that interesting? Now, a great number of these reports turned out to be the U-2 spy plane that we mentioned all the way back in point number 5, if you remember that far away. But that still leaves 700 completely unexplained sightings of aircraft that the USAF looked into and could not find answers for. The project was ultimately shut down in 1969, with the official explanation being given that, number 1, no UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force has ever given any indication of threat to our national security. And number 2, there has been no evidence submitted to or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represent technological developments or principles beyond the range of present-day scientific knowledge. And number 3, there has been no evidence indicating the sightings categorized as unidentified are extraterrestrial vehicles. Oh, well that sounds like kind of a bit of a bummer, doesn't it? They went through thousands of documents and declared that none of it was worthwhile evidence to suggest that aliens exist. Well, it's a shame that we're never going to mention any more things of the Air Force on this video, or any more things about pilots encountering aliens. I mean, that really blows. I mean, except for our next point. Take a listen. Number 2, the UAP report. Very recently, the Pentagon declassified a series of documents known internally as the UAP report, and it was basically the sequel to Project Blue Book, the streaming follow-up. And yeah, every single time we have an alien video, I'm probably going to have a little meltdown where I talk about how last year the government confirmed that they researched UFOs and that's what they spend your money on, and no one seemed to care about this, they just slipped it under the rug. I guess we were kind of busy with other stuff, but still, what happened to our curious minds, people? We learned that the various 3-letter agencies in the States had been researching, analyzing, and scouting out sightings of UFOs, mostly because pilots just could not stop reporting them during training ops. One pilot, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, claims that he saw hundreds, maybe thousands in his career as a Navy pilot. One of the more famous ones is the Tic Tac sighting, referring to a massive oval-shaped aircraft that was spotted by 2 pilots. This one comes from 2004, and the 2 veteran pilots, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, were the ones who called it in. 2 respected, trustworthy Navy veterans. Their report reads that the objects were spotted almost out of nowhere, some 80,000 feet in the air, which would then descend rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, then stop at around 2,000 feet and hover in place. Very normal airplane behavior. They would drop out of radar range or shoot directly up into the sky on a 90-degree angle. For weeks, Navy crew was watching these objects trying to determine just what they were. They certainly weren't American in origin, and they weren't recognized by any other organizations. To confirm what they'd seen, Slate and Fravor were set off on a reconnaissance mission to get eyes on it. What they found was more confusing than either of the 2 men could ever have imagined. They reported back that the object they were seeing was like a giant Tic Tac, white-colored, oval-shaped, and 40 feet long. Far too big to be a drone, and it didn't maneuver maneuver in a way like an aircraft would, making erratic movements, staying out of reach of radars, as if it knew it was trying to stay undetected. The pilots flew towards a rendezvous point to touch down and presumably cracked their windows open and asked each other, hey, what the hell was that? But as they flew towards the LZ, the UAP flew past them at a breakneck speed and then disappeared entirely. When questioned about it, Fravor said that it was unlike any aircraft he had ever seen in his life. I mean, that guy flew planes like every day for years, so he probably knows a thing or two. Number 1. Non-terrestrial officers. Now, if you're like me, you're probably frustrated that you know the truth is so close within grasp behind closed doors. To know in your heart of hearts that there are answers to the unexplained just out of sight would drive you to do something crazy. Now, for most of us, all we can do is sit and speculate and maybe watch some lovely top 5 videos of a very handsome host talking about aliens. But for one Gary McKinnon, a Scottish computer programmer, he decided that wasn't enough and decided to take matters into his own hands. McKinnon was a genius computer hacker and had his sights set on the biggest prize he could imagine, going after NASA's servers to see if they had any hidden alien data just waiting to be found, in what was described as the biggest military hack of all time. Quite the conversation starter. Why would anyone risk their career, freedom, and livelihood on this? Well, Gary wanted the truth and he would do anything to get it. McKinnon claims he had insider knowledge that confirmed the US had suppressed anti-gravity technology reverse engineered from UFOs and free energy. In his own statement, McKinnon said, "This should not be kept hidden from the public when pensioners can't even pay their fuel bills." Yeah. Well, so what did McKinnon find? Well, he didn't find proof of the reverse engineered UFOs that he'd been hoping for, but he found quite a lot that was remarkably illuminating. First up, a 400-page document called The Disclosure Project, outlining testimonials from government agents across multiple branches of service, reporting all their sightings and scientific analysis on unexplained flying objects. That would already be pretty impressive, but on top of that, McKinnon also managed to find a document entitled Non-Terrestrial Officers. Non-terrestrial officers? What? What? Is that just fancy talk for astronaut? Well, the document was a spreadsheet listing the names of NASA officers and employees who were to be transferred to new ships or to serve on board space stations. But here's where it gets weird. McKinnon noted that the names of these vessels listed did not appear to exist in any other database. And if that wasn't enough, McKinnon claims in his searching he saw images of aircraft that did not resemble anything he had ever seen. One in particular he describes as looking like a massive cigar-shaped craft floating over the northern hemisphere that did not look man-made. One wonders if that's the same as the Tic Tac ship. He said he was in a shock looking at the image and didn't think to take a photo. Now, after pulling off an unbelievable fast one on NASA, McKinnon couldn't resist a bit of cheeky cyber vandalism and edited NASA's website homepage with a bit of text that read, "Your security is crap, by the way." Now, I'm not endorsing hacking a government website, but that's one of the coolest things I've ever read. Now, I don't know how much you know about the United States government. Boy, do they just love it when you prove to them that they have a massive security breach in their most classified data. Presumably the only thing that kept McKinnon from being strapped to a car battery and thrown into a black van by the men in black was the fact that he lived in Scotland and was kind of hard to get a hold of. He was arrested by UK police, and the United States government tried their absolute hardest to have him extradited to the States to be tried for the fullest extent of his crimes. Honestly, I bet it was the note. I bet that's what really pushed them over the edge. McKinnon managed to avoid extradition and was protected by the Crown for serving out what would have been a 70-year sentence. But presumably he's not planning any road trips to the States anytime soon, and I'm sure NASA has improved their security just a little bit.
Number 5. Mars. The goal of the Mars exploration program is, quote, to explore Mars and to provide a continuous flow of scientific information and discovery through a carefully selected series of robot orbiters, landers, and mobile laboratories interconnected by a high bandwidth Mars-Earth communications network. Okay, yeah, that's great and all, but like, are you selecting which pictures you share with us? Cause we'd love to see what the planet looks like. In 4K, please. I know I would. I think it's funny that we can see an infrared cloud into the vast distances of space with the new Webb telescope, yet 4K pictures, still none of the other side of the moon. Huh, that's weird. I mean, it's a lot closer if we wanted to start there, you know? But Mars is great too. We've all seen the pictures of right angles and impossibly formed canyons and craters from Perseverance to get an idea of what exactly the red planet looks like. Yeah, it's red. And sandy, like PEI sand. But we're starting to see some weirder and weirder stuff from NASA as it collects scientific information up there. Like, say, this potential crash landing site. I mean, if it was a crater, bigger hole. If it was an asteroid, bigger hole. Nope, just this thing that looks exactly like what it'd look like if you whipped a rock into sand. Just kinda skips and you know? this would happen. Buzz Lightyear to Star Command, we've crash landed on a strange planet. I don't know, I'm not saying this stuff's covered up or anything, but like, I feel like if we have the equivalent of a bad garage door security camera, you know? Doing like a long 345-degree shots and only showing us more sand. This thing could be in the Gobi Desert for all we know. We'd never know the difference. Show us the bases. Where's the monoliths? Also, one lens? One lens? Like, where's the X-ray, the infrared, radio waves? Let's go, people. We've all played No Man's Sky. Where's the 4K and the jetpacks, dude? Number 4, Paul Hellyer. Okay, now on to some more scary stuff. Hey, also, if you dig the channel, make sure you like and subscribe, or comment down below. Do you think they're releasing this late report to Congress or what? Just kinda hoping everyone forgets it's due and just moves on? Anyway, flying on up to Canada, who's been involved in UFOs for a very, very long time. The RAF and RCMP have been on top of this stuff. I'd say even before the Americans. Paul Theodore Hellyer, August 1923 to August 2021. First off, rest in paradise, sir. This man has done more for us up north than we'll ever know. This man has and will play a huge role in the UAP phenomenon as a whole. I encourage you all to look into Paul here a little bit deeper. An engineer, a politician, writer, commentator. He was the longest serving member of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada. In 1967, Hellyer inaugurated a UAP landing site in St. Paul, Alberta. The town built it as a Canadian Centennial Celebration project, as a symbol of keeping space free from human warfare. In 2005, Hellyer made headlines by publicly announcing that he was a true believer in the existence and was an invited speaker at the conference in Toronto where he shared that he had seen a UFO during his career. In 2007, Paul was demanding world governments to disclose alien tech that could be used to solve problems of climate change. Hey, that's pretty cool. In an interview in 2014, Hellyer said that at least 4 species of aliens have been visiting Earth for the last 1,000 years, with most of them passing by from another star system, and of course, those living with us on Earth from Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moons. Awesome. Just for some credentials here, Paul ran for the federal election like 12 times. Yeah, Air Force, Navy, former Minister of National Defense. Guy was 98, people. Do some homework. He's easily the highest ranked true tinfoil hatter we know of. 98 years that man graced our planet. I wonder what he knew. Number 3, government. Speaking of disclosure and how we're all kind of right in the middle of it, right now, we go to Congress. It's odd because we obviously joke and have a good time and make light of the whole situation, but like, whether you like it or not, it's happening. First off, I'm scared. I'll admit it, I'm scared. I scared my stuff into this stuff. I discovered John Greenwald in like the 9th grade and it's been rabbit holes ever since. Let me tell you. When Congress starts talking about other planets and aliens, it starts mocking up some public citizen hearings with ex-Congress members. It's starting to get a little scary. But these public hearings, they whip this bad boy out. The cream of the crop UFO video that they say they have. The portrait mode, the 4 seconds of a circular something. Like, that's it? Apparently it's taken from the cockpit of a US fighter jet. May 17th, 2022, members of the United States House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, and Counter-Proliferation held Congress hearings with top military officials to discuss the reports of UAPs. Did you miss it? Yeah, it was at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Yeah, really important stuff. Also, how come they put like the grainy 90s filter on the video? Dude, like we make videos here, we're not gonna notice that? This thing's grainier than the first episode of The Golden Girls. The first public Congress hearing in over 50 years, and this is it. Again, there's some mock citizen hearings that were way more convincing and way more informative from way more reliable personnel. Also, better quality. Interesting, huh? But again, why wasn't all this shared when it originally happened? The government says, yeah, there's like 14 things we can't explain, yet try and solve the easy ones. Apparently there's like 144 more classified videos to just rummage through. It's been a big month, I will say that. 16 candidates for the new UAP NASA program, report late from Halloween, weather balloons, airborne clutter, foreign surveillance. What are they going to tell us this week? Number 2, Dave Foley. And we come to yet another great Canadian, Mr. Dave Foley. Those of you who aren't familiar with the North and what we produce up here, Dave is a Canadian actor, comedian, director, producer, and writer. He created Kids in the Hall, a Canadian gem, and also an avid believer in the phenomenon. He took to Twitter a couple months ago and caught the attention of many. Foley tweeted, quote, "After years of interest in the UFOs without ever seeing anything, I saw something. This is a drawing of what I saw. I was with a friend who I'll let decide if he wants to be attached to this. It moved silently, at great speed, hovered and pulsated with light. End quote. Now this ship does look a lot like what we've seen in the past reports, so who knows, Dave may actually have seen a UFO. Maybe these aliens are just fans of A Bug's Life. Guys flick, man. Maybe they just want an autograph, I know I would. He continues online, quote, "Many people who have encountered the phenomenon are afraid to discuss it because of the thoughtless and uninformed derision it inspires. Many who discuss it have had their lives ruined by that derision." I should point out, the white lights were on the front of the craft, assuming it was moving forward, and those lights pulsated separately from the body of the craft, which also pulsated. We felt like our emotions were being tamped down. We were unnaturally unresponsive to what we were seeing. In a way, I'm still experiencing that. End quote. Hey, it's all fun and games when the celebs get involved, isn't it? But up here, Canada's been involved for a long time. More publicly, too. Just last week, a report said that Canadians were briefed last year on what's what with the phenomenon. A document released a couple days ago say the February briefings were delivered by multiple members of the Pentagon UAP task force, and attending was 10 Canadian defense officials, including the Royal Canadian Air Force and military intelligence. Right? Like, not just comedians and sketches, you know? These people have been around a while and read some stuff. Paul Hellyer type stuff. And number 1, Tom DeLonge. Come on, this is an easy one. And probably the most confusing yet reliable source of them all? I know, trust me. Blink-182. "Hey mom, there's something in the back room." Well, there actually could be. Remember enjoying their song Aliens Exist before believing that aliens actually exist? Yeah, the lyrics hit a bit different now, don't they? Cut to 2017, former Blink member Tom DeLonge, now the co-founder of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Sounds fun, right? Until you see the panel. Military generals, astrophysicists, psychologists that have been studying this stuff since the 50s. It's the real deal. But how can a rock star be the head of this phenomenon? Well, he's into aliens, and that's an understatement. Susan Gao, the Pentagon spokesperson who made the public statements on disclosure, said that the Navy had confirmed that those 3 videos that are so wide in circulation are authentic recordings made by naval aviators. And guess who got all those out to us? Quote, "Everyone still looks to the United States government as having all the resources. We've been waiting around as scholars and researchers for many decades, hoping God that one day the government would come to us on what this is. This whole thing could be answered by the government. We're just waiting for them to come help us out with some of the research. This situation that happened is what we've been hoping it would do, so it can ignite more intellectuals to get into this race and help us figure out more about it." End quote. I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. Physicists, astronauts, that's who we want to hear from, you know? And just for dessert, here's what Tom posted on his Instagram. You tell me what's up.
Number 5, TikTok sighting. Our first entry on this list comes to us from a very reputable source, TikTok. TikTok user Drillabang, who posted this video recently online. The caption, "We caught them out there," is almost Mulder's catchphrase of "The truth is out there." Almost. And it seems like they are. The video shows a short clip of someone filming the sky and clouds, and passing through the clouds slowly is something. It's kind of hard to tell. It's an unidentified flying object. A small black being with what looks like tentacles protruding from it, like a little black jellyfish. The entity is moving slowly through the sky, with what looks like an electrical field following all around it. The being appears to be electrical, possibly a small mechanical drone. My first thought looking at one of these things is just how much this thing looks like the Sentinels from the Matrix. Could very well be evidence of the simulation leaking through. This clip is undeniably pretty odd. It's hard to make out just how big this flying entity is, although it does look a little bit small, but really it's hard to tell. Is it a spacecraft? Is it a living being but biomechanical? Is it a drone? Of course, it has to be said, the clip, as impressive as it is, could very well be a high production hoax. Like I said, the thing really does look a little too perfect for me, and it looks a lot like one of those Matrix Sentinels. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if it's a shrunken down 3D model of it used for the video. But real or fake, you can't deny that the video is captivating and has people talking. Well, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments about this one if you think this has you convinced. And hey, while I've got you here listening, you want to see a whole lot more spooky stuff this month? Well, I got news for you, pal. I got boxes full of spooky stuff. Subscribe for a fresh fright in your inbox delivered daily. Number 4, Chilean UFO. Our next entry was posted to Reddit on r/aliens. I mean, where else are you gonna find alien clips? The video posted is filmed from a mountain in Chile, where a group of friends on a hike found something amazing in the sky and luckily had their phones on them to record it. This entity floating around them doesn't really look like your traditional UFO sightings. It looks like a ball of pure energy just hovering above them in a triangular shape, looking like distilled pure light or just some photons or something. Looking around in the background, you can see there's nothing around them. No airports, no mysterious army bases nearby, just a big mountain range and a bizarre glowing ball of light hovering around aimlessly. A user on Reddit offered a rudimentary translation of the friends talking, which adds a little bit of insight to the clip. We can hear the friends joking that it could be a spirit bomb from Goku and there's going to be an epic duel soon. Goku is technically an alien, so I guess if Goku was real and you saw him flying around on the Nimbus cloud, that would qualify for a UFO sighting. They go on to joke that it looks like something out of the movie Independence Day. It's really hard to say just what this thing is. Now, usually I tend to roll a little bit more Scully than Mulder, and I'm naturally a bit skeptic, but I am completely out of ideas looking at this thing. The edges of the triangle are so very visible, and it doesn't really seem like it follows any one particular flight pattern. I can't take even the slightest guess what this might be, so your guess is just as good as mine, my ghouls and goblins. Take a look for yourself, and decide for yourself what the answer is. Number 3, the Ring of Light. Another entry coming to us fresh from Reddit, posted by user Jesse Zell. A short clip that shows us something incredibly bizarre. The clip is captioned appropriately, "The most unexplained thing I have ever seen in my life," and I'm strongly inclined to agree. Take a little look-see. In the clip, we get a pretty good shot at a suburban house and the overcast night sky above. A little bit above the house, there appears to be a ring of light that appears, circling around, appearing a few lights at a time, rounding the house a few times. That's bizarre. Even the skeptics should buy into this one. I mean, it's easy to just imagine a flying saucer hovering a little bit out of view atop the clouds, descending its undercarriage lights on the neighborhood. A user in the comments proposed that it could just be nothing more than a series of spotlights. But the original poster and uploader of the video insists that from where they were standing, the lights are appearing above the clouds, not below them. And even then, what explains the perfectly circular pattern displayed? The user goes on to say that there was no particularly loud noises emanating from around the skies, and it was very hard to make out what was happening. They go on to add that they're very familiar with drones and have drones flying around their home with some regularity. I'm hoping they mean just a neighbor or an enthusiast and not that they're being watched. And that they would recognize a drone if there was one, and that they are certain these lights were not caused by drones. So just what is causing it? What was it? Is this Reddit user being observed by someone from the stars? Are they potentially a target for an abduction? We eagerly await a follow-up on this one. Number 2, the cube. Posted to YouTube by user, well, fittingly named, Is This a UFO? This brief 20-second clip showcases a pilot filming from inside the cockpit. Also, side note before I start talking about all the alien stuff, is that safe? Are you allowed to be doing that? I guess the plane doesn't crash in the video, so I'll take their word for it. Anyway, the clip is really short and sweet. We see from the window that there's a small cuboid-like shape blasting through the sky. The footage is extremely clear, unlike most UFO footage, and it's really easy to see what's happening, although it doesn't help matters much or provide you with any clear answers. What we can see is a small black cube propelling itself forward. There's no trail of smoke, no lights flashing, just a small black cube flying around. So what is that? Some comments in the video suggest that it could be a weather balloon or a helium balloon, although I gotta say the altitude is a bit questionable, or why it's traveling horizontally so fast. Its travel in the video does seem a bit pointed and intentional, like it's trying to get somewhere, although that could just be me wanting to apply sentient traits for it because I badly want to believe. Interestingly though, in 2014, a report from a 10-year Navy pilot veteran, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, claims that in his service, he would see UFOs nigh daily and would report them constantly, only to have his reports ignored. Interesting. He said in his time in the service, he'd see unexplainable objects flying by him at hypersonic speeds with no trails, no exhaust, often 30,000 feet up in the air undetected by his radar. He said one of the more consistent things that he would see was an object that looked like a sphere encased in a cube. Kinda sounds a bit like the cube propelling itself forward in this clip, doesn't it? Fascinatingly, after this report from Graves, the Navy announced it would be changing the way it handled UFO reports internally. Perhaps there's something they know and they're not telling us. Number 1, the laser pointer. And finally, we're down to our number 1 clip. Now this is my favorite clip of the bunch, by far. I mean, I would hope so, otherwise why would I bother putting it at the #1 spot? This clip also comes to us from Reddit from user Luke511, filming above him what appears to be a ball of light bouncing around bizarrely in the sky. A UFO if I've ever seen one. Luke, who when faced with the dangers of the unknown, the wonders of the cosmos, possibly standing on a chance to make that fabled first contact with another civilization with unknown frontiers, stood proudly and takes a laser pointer out and starts flashing it upwards to the sky. Now I have nothing but respect for this absolute madman who got right down to brass tacks. Because him flashing that laser pointer made this video go from, oh, maybe that's a UFO, to, oh, that is definitely a spacecraft being piloted by an intelligent being. In the video, as soon as you see him flashing it around, the vehicle maneuvers on a dime, trying clearly to avoid the laser, which is pretty damning. Now the reason I love this clip so much, besides the fact that I do think it's pretty concrete evidence, assume these really are aliens flying around in that spacecraft. Imagine you're coming down to a new planet and you see a green beam coming from the ground pointing directly at you. Do you think they were freaking out? Do you think they were losing their minds, panicking that they got made? That laser was gonna come for them and destroy them? Or do you think it was more like a kitten situation? Like they saw the laser and got distracted by a really enticing game of intergalactic chase? Luke511, this has gotta be a top moment for humanity and for you as a whole. Tagging a UFO with a laser beam and potentially scaring alien life has got to be a landmark moment for us as a species. My only concern is that maybe this event might have sent intergalactic relations back just a little bit. I'm hoping aliens aren't afraid to visit the planet now because of the danger of green lights. We'll turn them off, we promise. We're sorry, it was just a little prank.
Number 5, Al Worden. American test pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut Alfred Merrill Worden was the module pilot for the Apollo 15 lunar mission in 1971. One of the 24 people who have flown to the moon. Woohoo! He's got a couple of firsts though. He orbited it 74 times in the command module. He was the first to drive a moon car. After Apollo 15 reached lunar orbit and his crewmates departed, and Worden spent 3 days alone in his module. That's terrifying. Traveling the furthest out from any other human. After he returned, the crew and him became involved in a NASA controversy, however. Not over leaked alien info, but over postage stamps they had taken to the moon. Yeah, big no-no apparently. They were reprimanded by NASA and did not fly in space again. Worden remained at NASA until 1975, then entered a private sector. And then it gets weird. On a British television morning show, Al Worden started talking about some interesting stuff. They asked him, why should we keep going back to the moon? He paused and replied, survival. Survival of our species. Worden also rejected the notion that humans could colonize planets within our solar system, calling them unsustainable. Then he claims he knows where to find habitable planets. When pressed on aliens if he believes them or not, he said, yes. You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Yeah, we are the aliens though. We just think there's somebody else. But we were the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive. They got in their little spaceship and they came here and they landed and they started civilization here. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they have to say about it. They'll tell you right up front, end quote. Okay, when you hear an astronaut say that, kinda jarring. Number 4, Roswell. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button. Birth of the UAP phenomenon. 1945, the US's first nuclear explosion. 1946, first underwater nuclear explosion. 1947, the first crash flying saucer. Coincidence? I think not. Especially since they've been known to hover around nuclear bases. Probably for the better. Humans are kind of the worst. Local rancher Mac Brazel finds the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Sheriff Wilcox shows RAAF's commanding officer Colonel Blanchard the materials, and during the night, the Air Force combs the entirety of the property, apparently harboring 2 small injured alien bodies. Taking them, of course, to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico that night. And the very next morning, the Roswell Air Force makes a statement claiming they have recovered a crashed flying disc in local newspapers. Boom! History, baby! Photographs of Jesse Marcel, the head intelligence officer who investigated and recovered some of the debris. The very next day, the Army retracts their statement and all of a sudden, a high-altitude weather balloon. Can you believe that, huh? AKA the birth of a conspiracy theory. Nuclear fission explosions, weather balloons. Something's not adding up here. Number 3, Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Dean Mitchell was a US Navy officer, aviator, test pilot, engineer, NASA astronaut, and of course, a ufologist. Ufology is the pseudo term for somebody who studies the UFO phenomenon. I don't think there's a degree you can get that in. If so, I'm signing up. What school? What school, sorry? He was the lunar module pilot of the Apollo 14 in 1971 and spent 9 hours working on the lunar surface. He was the 6th person to walk on the moon. Yeah, he was walking while Worden was up there drifting in the currents of space. Mitchell publicly expressed his opinions and that he was sure that there were thousands of UFOs recorded since the early 1940s belonging to other planets. Thousands. Dateline NBC conducted an interview with Mitchell in 1996. He talked about meeting with officials from 3 different countries who claimed that they had met extraterrestrials in person. Quote, "The evidence for alien contact was very strong and classified by governments, who were covering up visitations and existence of alien bodies in places such as Roswell, New Mexico." Mitchell's book, The Way of the Explorer, discusses his journey. In 2004, he told the St. Petersburg Times that the US government was studying alien bodies and that this group had specifically stopped briefing US presidents since the 1960s. He said, quote, "We all know that UFOs are real. Now, the question is, where do they come from?" In 2008, Mitchell then was interviewed and claimed that Roswell crash was in fact the aliens that had contacted humans several times, but that the government had hidden the truth for more than 60 years. Scary stuff, scary stuff. He sadly passed in 2016. If we just reread the credentials alone, just one more time. Number 2, James McDivitt. James Alton McDivitt is an American test pilot, Air Force pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut who flew in both the Gemini and Apollo programs. After graduating first in his class with a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering, he qualified as a test pilot at the Air Force. In 1962, McDivitt was selected by NASA for the Gemini 4 mission. In 1965, he saw, filmed, and photographed an object which approached the Gemini 4 as they were orbiting Earth. Over Hawaii, a craft of some sort. The UFO had a long arm sticking out of it. Here's what Major James McDivitt said. "I was flying with Ed White. He was sleeping at the time, so I don't have anybody to verify this story, but we were drifting in space when suddenly an object appeared in the window. It's a cylindrical object, white. It had a long arm that stuck out of the side. The film was sent back to NASA and reviewed by some NASA film technicians. One of them selected what he thought was what they were talking about, at least before I had the chance to review it, and it was not the picture. It was a picture of a sun reflection on the window." So what were the pictures that he was talking about? In 1975, McDivitt said, "I never made a big deal out of it. It was something I definitely couldn't identify. It looked like a beer can with a pencil sticking out of it. Yeah, I would eventually give up on that too if those were my credentials and people were like, yeah, right, James." When somebody has like 25 years of designing and flying space shuttles around, when they say, "Hey guys, I'm seeing something up here," it's not like, "Oh, James, clean those old specs, would you? Yuck, yuck. Houston, we have a problem." And number 1, Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr., an American aerospace engineer, test pilot, US Air Force pilot, and the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury, the first human space program in the United States. You know the pictures. It looks like they're wearing a tinfoil suit, you know? Old school, old school. After service as a fighter pilot in World War II, he qualified as a test pilot in 1956 and then was selected as an astronaut in 1959. In 1963, Cooper piloted the longest and last Mercury spaceflight, Mercury Atlas 9. 34 hours in space. The first American to spend an entire day in space, the first person to sleep in space, and the last American launched on a solo orbit mission. In Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, co-authored by Bruce Henderson, he recounted his experiences with the Air Force and NASA and an alleged UFO conspiracy. Cooper claimed to have seen his first UFO while flying over Germany, then saw them land in a dry lake bed. Cooper claimed up until his death that the US was indeed covering up UFOs. He said that there were hundreds of reports made by his fellow pilots, many coming from the military pilots on radar. In his memoirs, Cooper wrote that he had seen unexplained aircrafts tons in his career, and that in 1978 he actually testified before the United Nations on the topic. He sadly passed in 2004. He was such a strong advocate for disclosure, and all of these astronauts are remembered as putting their neck and name out on the line for some truth. But I mean, those UFO enthusiasts, huh? They're all wackos, right? Right?
Number 5 on this list is the wow signal.
The WOW signal is a sound that an astronomer received many years ago that, as of right now, is probably the closest thing we've ever gotten to alien contact. Now, I do want to say that just because we got this signal doesn't mean that they're living among us. However, it does give a strong indication that they're out there in the first place, which is frankly half the battle. Intelligencer writes, in 1977, Ohio State's Big Ear Radio telescope intercepted a 72-second burst of sound that bore signs of having come from interstellar space, which could be a sign of extraterrestrial communication. The anomaly measured 1,420 megahertz, a frequency in the water hole, the term for a radio emission range thought ideal for intergalactic messages because it's unusually quiet. Jerry Amon, the astronomer who spotted it, was so excited that he scribbled a giant "wow" on his printout. Astronomers' explanations for the bizarre phenomenon include secret spy satellites and a passing comet nobody knew about in 1977. But many admit nothing explains it adequately, and even if the signal doesn't prove aliens exist, it's still a tug on the cosmic fishing line. To date, it remains the best evidence of alien communication ever obtained. So WOW is right in this case. To receive something like that is a very strong indication that not only is there life out in the universe, but it's also intelligent life. At least intelligent enough to be operating sound systems powerful enough to emit such a frequency in the first place. Again, it's not proof that they're assuredly here on Earth, but it's a good start for sure. Number 4 on this list is habitable planets. Scientists are currently finding more and more planets that are in what is called the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is the area from a star that is not too cold and also not too hot, so it should be able to support life from how we've come to understand it. As science learns more and more about these planets, there have been a few that have surfaced that scientists are particularly bullish about. Proxima b, TRAPPIST-1 system, LHS-114-OB, Ross-128b, GJ-121-4b. Now, those probably mean absolutely nothing to you at all, but those are all the planets that have been discovered to be in the Goldilocks zone and could support life. They are also all the planets that people have reported scientists not wanting to talk about. There's a bit of a conspiracy theory going on right now that scientists have actually discovered proof of alien life in these locations, but are hiding it from the public so as to not start a mass chaos. Now, this is all speculation, but why else would these scientists want to hide information about planets that are apparently in the perfect spot to harbor life? Hard to say for sure, but aliens are definitely a possibility. Number 3 on this list is the numbers game. The universe has widely been believed to be infinite. That means it's really freaking big. If the universe is infinite, then it only makes sense that there would be at least some place out there that has other life. That, my friends, is basically the numbers game. BBC writes, most scientists agree that alien life almost certainly exists in the universe somewhere. Our galaxy contains in the region of 300 billion stars, and we're now discovering planets traveling around these stars. The more we look and the more technology we put out there, the more of these exoplanets we find. To date, we've detected around 4,000, and that's just in our galaxy. If we look at the universe as a whole, then there are approximately 200 billion galaxies. Why would life just occur here? We're pretty convinced it's out there, says space scientist Maggie Adarin-Pocock. It is purely a numbers game, it is a probability. So this argument makes a lot of sense to me, guys. 200 billion galaxies, that is a lot of galaxies and a lot of stars in those galaxies, and basically just a lot of chances to have life appear. Now, this life doesn't necessarily need to be living among us. It could be out in the universe waiting to be found, but similar to our WOW signal example, this is a great start. It's widely believed in the scientific community that there is life out there, and who knows, maybe it's here too. Number 2 on this list is the Billionaires. Now, this is going to be a bit of a fallacy because I'm going to appeal to authority with this one. Basically, I'm going to say that there are a bunch of smart, powerful and rich people out there who believe in the existence and presence of aliens, and therefore we should too. Now, I understand that this is a fallacy and not concrete evidence, but I do believe that acknowledging these people's opinions and at least questioning why they might be thinking this way, well, that's important. Let's name off a few people who are currently obsessed with space travel and contacting aliens. Robert Bigelow, Elon Musk, Paul Allen, Yuri Milner, Jeff Bezos, Franklin Antonio. What do these gentlemen have in common? Well, they are all super rich and they are all fascinated with space and aliens. Now, this isn't proof of anything. This isn't evidence that says aliens are among us, but I do think that it's a sign. If I saw these men all investing in the same stock, then I would also invest in that same stock. If I saw all of these men looking at the same thing, and in this case aliens and space travel, and throwing billions of dollars at it, then I'd wonder to myself, why are they doing that? Well, they're probably doing that because they seem to think that aliens are in fact real and potentially are among us. I can comfortably acknowledge that every single one of those people that I listed is more intelligent than I am, and if every one of them are deeply invested in aliens, then I think that's a sign maybe we should be as well. And finally, number 1 on this list is the encounters. Sometimes we think of encounters with aliens as being few and far between, or that those who have had encounters with said aliens are off their rocker or aren't being truthful. Based on the amount of encounters that we've had and the individuals or groups involved in said encounters, both of those assumptions are categorically false. The fact of the matter is that there have been hundreds, thousands of encounters that humans have had with potential alien life throughout the years. Detailed accounts of everything that went down. Stuff that doesn't seem likely for someone to make up. Whether it be Barney and Betty Hill's abduction, Antonio Villas-Boas, the Foo Fighters, the Kecksburg UFO crash, Kenneth Arnold's incident, the Pheonix Lights, or any of the other many notable encounters that have happened in the past, no one can deny that people have been seeing aliens for quite a while. So picking an encounter at random, let's talk about the Travis Walton abduction. This is just another one of the many encounters that hit the big news after it happened. Intelligencer says, in 1975, a team of loggers claimed their 22-year-old co-worker, Travis Walton, disappeared for 5 days after a glowing disc in the Arizona woods zapped him with a bluish ray. Intrigued, he'd reportedly wandered underneath the hovering object and it abducted him. He claims he awoke on a table in a sterile-looking room surrounded by 3 well-developed fetuses wearing tan robes. He tried to flee, passed out, then regained consciousness only once the aliens had ditched him on the Arizona roadside. The news blew up when Walton was finally found. Apparently, him and the group of guys passed lie detector tests, and Walton himself was taken to a hypnotist to try and see if he was lying, which he wasn't. So in this case, it's clear Walton at least wholeheartedly believes he's telling the truth. Also, if he wasn't telling the truth, or that's not what happened to him, then where the heck was he for 5 entire days? A guy just vanished off of the face of the planet for 5 days and is found walking along the roadside in Arizona later? Like, that doesn't just happen, folks. Due to the extensive amount of encounters and the detail to which the stories are described, how can we say without a doubt that aliens aren't living among us? I'll answer that for you. We can't. Number 5 on this list is Helen Sharman. Dr. Helen Sharman was the first ever British woman to go to space. She went in 1991 on a mission to the Soviet space station. Dr. Helen Sharman is extremely well educated, renowned in her community, and is one of the very few people in the history of humankind who's actually been to space. Therefore, I hold her opinion in extremely high regard when we're referring to something like extraterrestrial life. And her opinion is that said life is already here. Dr. Helen Sharman told The Observer's magazine that aliens exist. There's no two ways about it. There must be all sorts of different forms of life. She went on to say in her interview that it's possible they're here right now and we simply can't see them. Like I said earlier, this is an actual astronaut who's saying this right now. Someone who very clearly knows far more about this than your average Joe and whose opinion should be acknowledged. Now, just because one person believes that alien life could potentially be on Earth, well, that's far from fact. but oftentimes when we think about aliens and the potential of them being on our planet, it can easily get chalked up to some mumbo jumbo from people who aren't well researched or properly educated on the topic. That certainly can't be said about Helen Sharman, and I think that the fact that someone of this background is openly coming out and giving this opinion shows that the culture surrounding aliens is changing. I think that as time goes on, we'll see a lot more individuals like Helen come out and express this opinion, further adding to the validity of alien life living among us. Number 4 on this list is Oumuamua. Oumuamua was first discovered on October 19th in 2017, and it holds the title as being the very first discovered interstellar object to visit our solar system. Now, even though this object isn't necessarily evidence of aliens being here on Earth, a lot of people look to it as evidence of aliens' existence as a whole. The biggest name on this list of alien believers being Avi Loeb. Avi is a Harvard professor for astrophysics and has made it known that he doesn't think this object entering our solar system is your typical comet or asteroid. He's come out and said that this object is actually an alien probe sent to search for other life in the universe. In fact, he wrote, Oumuamua may be a fully operational probe sent intentionally to Earth's vicinity by an alien civilization. One of the biggest reasons he thinks this and others believe it is due to this object's strange movement. The speed at which this object is flying doesn't seem to fit in with our current laws of physics. The object is simply moving too fast for the gravitational pull that we believe to be acting upon it. It's also flipping and maneuvering itself in a way that doesn't seem to make any sense. Now, this thing is wildly far away, so even though we can get a rough estimate of how big it is, and it certainly is very sizable, it's hard to know for sure exactly what this thing is. He has faced some backlash in the scientific community for his claims, but then again, everybody who comes out and talks about aliens typically does. All we know for sure about this thing is that it came from a completely different solar system and seems to be accelerating in speed, which doesn't make any sense to anyone. I don't want to wholeheartedly jump on the alien train simply because of this logic, but I also don't think that immediately writing off a Harvard astrophysics professor is the smart thing to do either. Number 3 on this list is alien bacteria. One of the biggest knocks against any argument associated with aliens is that our solar system hasn't shown any signs of life except for Earth. This isn't necessarily true though, based on a recent study that has come out in regards to Venus. Venus is one heck of a planet and certainly not somewhere that I would want to live. The storms are mighty, the temperature is way too hot, and acid regularly rains down from the sky. Not the ideal location if you ask me. One thing that Venus is also home to is a rare poisonous gas, phosphine. Now you're probably thinking, well, how would a poisonous gas indicate any signs of alien life? Wouldn't it indicate the opposite? And in most cases you might be right. However, phosphine is almost always linked to the presence of life. On Earth, phosphine is produced by microorganisms as they digest organic matter. This is why we consider it to be a biosignature and an indicator of life. Venus is certainly different from Earth, and we can't simply apply what makes sense here to Venus without asking some questions. However, this is a strong indicator from scientists that life is certainly possible from Venus. We've also seen before that Mars might contain some life. These two planets may not house the typical alien life that you may picture in your brain, but a bacteria from Venus or Mars is just as alien as somebody flying down in a UFO. Is it not possible that somehow, through our extensive history, debris from Venus or debris from Mars landed on Earth and developed life here? Maybe we never even realized that this life was alien to begin with. Number 2 on this list is microorganisms. We just talked about how Venus could be the host to life, bacteria or other small organisms that we've yet to identify. Well, one of the biggest arguments against aliens living among us is that we haven't seen them yet. Sure, there have been some stories here and there, but nothing on a major and global scale. What if we aren't looking properly though? What if our understanding of life doesn't match with what an alien life form is? Scientists have thought deeply about this possibility and what this could mean. This life, seeing as it would not compute with our definition of life, would actually live in what experts refer to as a shadow biosphere. Now, this shadow biosphere isn't some alternate dimension or ghost realm, but but it's a biosphere with organisms that have a completely different biochemistry than we're familiar with. We're made up of carbon and nitrogen, but why are we automatically assuming that an alien would be made up of this as well? It could be just as likely that alien beings are made up of other elements. If this was the case, then it's most likely on a microscopic scale, and that's why we haven't been able to recognize them yet. We currently have a very limited way of studying microbes, and we need to be testing for a very specific microbe to know what it is. If we aren't searching for the proper microbe though, then it's very likely we could miss it. A lot of scientists have gotten on board with this shadow biosphere train and talked about its legitimacy. Once again, this isn't damning proof that there are aliens out there, but it does mean that there isn't damning proof against them either. Just because we don't see alien life, it doesn't mean that it's not here. Number 1 on this list is the 2004 UFO sightings. Now, I just used this point in a previous video called Top 5 Scary Discoveries the Government Doesn't Want You to Know About, and I do hate reusing the same point, but it just has to be included in this video as well. For those who aren't aware, the 2004 UFO sightings happened very close to San Diego by the United States Navy. These sightings were by multiple people and even caught on video. Just like in our last top 5 video, I want to play some of the footage so you guys can see what I'm referring to here. Those videos were caught by the US Navy and weren't released to the public until years after it happened. As you can see in those clips, the UFO that is flying through the sky doesn't look like anything man-made at all. The way it moves through the air is unlike anything we've been able to build. For instance, one of the Navy officers reported seeing it cruise at 60,000 feet and then immediately dropping to only 50 feet above the sea. It did this without making a sonic boom and did it almost instantly. That defies our current understanding of flying objects and leads a lot of people to believe this was from another intelligent species. Now, no one is sure if this object was being piloted by some sort of alien or if it was an alien probe operating by itself. I should also note that a UFO sighting isn't undeniable proof of alien life. It might just be something that we don't understand. However, the way that it flies through space has got to make us wonder. If something is flying through our air like that and it's that advanced, is it possible that something like that could have landed without us knowing? I think that might be a fair assumption. And if that's possible, then is it also possible that some sort of alien creature got out of said object and is now living among us? Frankly, I think that's also a fair assumption too. We obviously don't know for sure, but I think that this footage is some of the clearest proof that aliens living among us might be a reality.
Kicking off at number 5, the Goa'uld Stargate. Although they may look like a bunch of mildly eccentric ancient Egyptian offshoots, the fact of the matter is the Goa'uld are absolutely terrifying because they're actually a bunch of parasitic snake-like worms that burrow into the neck or throat of their host, puppeteering them for the rest of their lives. Once in the body, they begin to wrap themselves around the spine, weaving around the nervous system where grotesque tendrils extend up the spinal column and then into the brain. Over nearly 3 decades of the Stargate franchise, including 4 feature-length films, the Goa'uld were pretty much an unrivaled evil, and no one could quite compete with their creepy level of parasitic violation. As Stargate explains, the snake-like Goa'uld first arose in the waters of the planet P3X888, originally as primal predators that eventually evolved to take the humanoids that cohabited the planet, the Unas, as hosts, which is an insane premise, isn't it? Imagine thinking you're the most physically superior race on the planet, only to get usurped by a bunch of terrifying spiky-toothed water worms. Yeah, nah. No thanks. Eventually, they pretty much enslaved the entire race of the native Unas and then led themselves out into the stars, piloting their parasitic hosts into their conveniently placed Stargate to populate themselves across the universe as ancient Egyptian gods. Yeah, the Goa'uld are pretty gross, if not really annoying. Next up at number 4, the Dark Eldar, Warhammer 40k. Now, you might be thinking that there are many more horrifying alien entities in the grim darkness of the Warhammer 40k universe. You've got the ravenous swarm of the Tyranids, the undead cybernetic soul overlords of the Necron, or the crazy scourge of the Chaos Marines. But let me tell you exactly why the Dark Eldar take the cake. They are the literal definition of cosmic evil, and it's made worse by the fact that they were once part of the most enlightened civilizations in the galaxy, their counterparts, the Eldar Empire. The Dark Eldar, also referred to as the Drukhari, are a race of ancient and highly advanced Fey humanoids, an offshoot of their kindred craftworld Eldar, after succumbing to the vile whisperings of the Chaos god Slanesh. Because of their ritualistic ritualistic worship of she who thirsts, they revel in the physical and emotional pain of others, feeding off the psychic residue of suffering and slowly consuming the will of the galaxy through piracy, slavery, and torture. Their insatiable lust for suffering, also known as the thirst, has led them to contort their way of life into an abomination of Eldar culture, dedicating themselves to a non-stop war of pain and misery against all other life forms. Yeah, these are the last guys you'd ever want at a dinner party. Swinging in at number 3, the Flood, Halo.
With talk, there is much talk, and I have listened through rock and metal and time.
And I don't say this lightly, theoretically speaking, the Flood are perhaps one of the greatest fictional threats to any universe ever. So we better hope that we've got a Master Chief floating around somewhere ready to save the day. Cortana 2. Teamwork. If you've ever played any of Bungie's resounding Halo series, you'll know that the Flood, mechanically speaking, are one of the most terrifying entities of all time to play against. You'll also know that they're a species of highly virulent parasitic organisms that reproduce and grow by consuming any and every sentient life form that they can get their maws on. The thing is though, the Flood aren't terrifying in the conventional sense. They're terrifying because their sole objective is to amalgamate any sentient life form, mutating and corrupting them through disease and infestation. Of course, every mutagenic brood race has to have a puppet master, and that's the equally terrifying Grave Minds, a rare creation of the Flood that forms the ultimate intelligence of their hive mind. They are near omniscient and have complete control over all other Flood creations. A Grave Mind is literally built from the thousands upon thousands of the Flood's dead enemies, reassembled into a massive, tentacled and highly intelligent entity, accumulating in all of the memories of every soul ever consumed by the Flood. Yeah, you get the picture, right? Next up at number 2, the Reapers, Mass Effect. Oh, Mass Effect. What did they do to you? As well as being one of my favourite video game series of all time, Mass Effect also gifted us one of the most terrifying hypothetical alien notions that you could ever imagine. And it's in the cosmic insignificance of the ancient race of Reapers that this entry truly shines. Throughout the Mass Effect trilogy, we're slowly drip-fed enough information as to what the Reapers' true intentions are, but it soon becomes clear that their designs are far more existentially evil than Shepard and his crew ever expected. Be noted guys, there are spoilers coming up ahead. For 50,000 years at a time, the Reapers, a machine race of synthetic organic starships, hibernate in the lifeless area of the universe known as dark space. There they lie dormant, waiting for primitive life to evolve their civilizations far enough and head out to the stars, populating their galaxies where they will eventually find the Citadel and the mass relay network capable of traversing the universe. Seemingly an ancient relic of technology that was left behind by a mysterious, highly advanced spacefaring species. But it turns out though that the Reapers were the original creators of this technology, and they purposely constructed it so that any intelligent life in the galaxy would eventually discover it and base their technology upon it, which it all turns out is all part of a scheme to harvest the galaxy's sentient life in a repeating cycle of purges that has continued relentlessly over countless millennia. They're the spiders, the Citadel is the web, and we're the flies. Yeah. Need I say more? And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the Borg Collective, Star Trek.
I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile.
Oh no, Jean-Luc. What have they done to you? Because there is one terrifying alien entity remaining, and this time it's personal. For me, there is nothing more humanly horrifying lingering out in the universe than the Borg, a highly advanced civilization of cyborgs that seek to conquer all known life in the relentless goal to perfect it, seizing other life forms, their technology, vessels, planets, and even entire star systems by force, enslaving them and assimilating their collective strengths into their shared consciousness. Personally speaking, the Borg Collective strike fear in me because they are both a metaphorical and literal obliteration of the individual. They destroy all nuances of difference, creativity and vibrancy, all in their pursuit of perfecting an assimilated galactic life form. Because of that, the Borg are an enemy to every known living race in existence, particularly humans and the crew of the Star Trek Enterprise. The Borg are believed to be over 200,000 years old, originating in Unimatrix 1 of the Delta Quadrant, where they began life as a small race of weak cybernetic life forms after merging merging machine to man. For any of you that haven't seen Star Trek, particularly The Next Generation, the first time you stumble upon the Borg is a horrifying, memorable moment, and the revelation of the greatest captain in the history of anything, my man Jean-Luc Picard, falling victim to the Borg Collective, is the visual representation of despair incarnate. Tea, Earl Grey, hot man. I hate the Borg. Kicking off at number 5, the proto-molecule, the Expanse. Alright guys, now before we dive into the terrifying implications of the proto-molecule, first consider this a public service announcement, because for those of you that haven't seen the incredible sci-fi series, The Expanse, then please go and watch all 3 seasons right now so you're up and ready for season 4. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. For those of you that don't know, the overriding conflict of the series is focused on a strange extraterrestrial molecular organism, although not a life form itself. The true terror of the proto-molecule is that no one has any idea what it is or what it even does, and when it gets in the hands of villainous humans and evil corporations, that's when things get really, really bad, as they tend to do. The proto-molecule is considered to be the technology of a highly advanced civilization launched out into space with Earth as its intended target over 2 billion years ago. It can infect other life forms on contact, spreading internally and then altering its host by repurposing specific organs to carry out new inhuman functions. Although in some senses the proto-molecule is considered to be ambivalent or even benevolent, when it is improperly harnessed by human scientists, the results are terrifying, and that's where the true fear of the proto-molecule lies. In the hands of humans, it's like giving a toddler a loaded gun, and for me, that's an incredibly well written sci-fi horror concept. Yeah, swinging in at number 4, the Yuuzhan Vong, Star Wars. And unfortunately, considering the fact that these guys are only written into the Star Wars wider universe, we don't have any kind of cinematic depiction of them. But that doesn't matter, because the Yuuzhan Vong are terrifying enough on paper alone. Alright, take the Klingons and the warlike Krogan from Mass Effect, jumble them up, give them a penchant for sadomasochism, and they'll still pale in comparison to how alien and messed up these guys are. In the Star Wars universe, the Yuuzhan Vong were amongst the few known alien species to originate outside of the known galaxy, and are alien in the truest sense of the word, even in a universe filled with hundreds of different species. And what's terrifying about them? Well, despite the self-mutilation and the cultural organ grafting that they practice, plus their religious zealotry and their endless war against all other life, unlike all other life forms in the galaxy, they're not able to be sensed through the Force. And yeah, Jedi and Sith alike quake in their boots at the thought of these guys. During the Yuuzhan Vong War, this warlike species pretty much brought the New Republic to its knees and were responsible for the deaths of, wait for it, nearly 365 trillion sentient beings during their invasion of the galaxy. They straight up conquered Coruscant with barely any effort, destroying countless planets along the way, wiping out entire generations in their wake. And although it's been made no longer canon, these guys killed Chewbacca. And for me, that's unforgivable. Next up at number 3, the Weeping Angels, Doctor Who. And yeah, how did Doctor Who make statues absolutely horrifying? Stephen Moffat. That's how. There's only one rule to the Weeping Angels: don't turn your back, don't look away, and don't blink. Now, a lot of you were calling for some Doctor Who aliens in our previous video, but don't worry guys, that's why we make multiple parts to these lists. But in my eyes, although on the surface the TARDIS has seen a multitude of horrifying creations, there are only 2 that truly take the cake as horror's best. And the first are these terrifying creations of stonework, the Weeping Angels. Because like with all great alien horror creations, it's in their implication where the fear truly lies. The Weeping Angels are an incredibly powerful species of ancient quantum-locked humanoids, where any observation of them forces them to become immobile stone statues, often covering their faces in a weeping appearance. It's the ultimate defense, and they're nigh impenetrable to any form of assault. When you can't see them though, that's when they get you, eradicating their victims by quantumly dropping them into the past through touch, feeding off their energy in a different time period. The Weeping Angels are almost as old as the universe itself, and they've been lingering in the forgotten corners of the universe, feeding off their unassuming victims like stone vampires, with seemingly one prime directive: draining the energy of all sentient life. Yeah, I don't need to say much more about the Weeping Angels, and don't even get me started on their cherub children. No thank you. Swinging in, species 8472.
Species 8472 has penetrated Matrix 010, Grid 19. 8 planets destroyed.
Now, although the Borg of Star Trek took the top spot in our previous video, there is in fact one species that even the Borg fear, and they're so unfathomably alien that they don't even have a name. Just a number, species 8472. Now, although the Borg were the overriding villains of the era of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, during Star Trek Voyager, the awesome Captain Janeway delved deeper into their true intention, only to discover their one true foe. These guys, a non-humanoid species who are the sole inhabitants of a strange dimension only referred to as fluidic space. Now, although the CGI of these guys isn't exactly fear-inducing, during the time, the fact that the Borg couldn't even assimilate species 8472 was fantastic sci-fi script writing because, again, it was in their implication. The Borg consider them to be the apex of biological evolution, and their mastery of the quantum singularity led to their species' vastly superior biology and organic technology. They don't sleep, they don't eat, they communicate telepathically, a single drop of their blood can bio-assimilate another life form, they are highly intelligent beyond the realms of even the Borg's comprehension, and effortlessly seek to destroy their opponent in the most efficient means possible. Oh yeah, and not only that, but they can assume the form of any known life form, at one point even infiltrating Starfleet as a means to gather enough information to eradicate humanity. Thankfully, Janeway managed to broker a peace deal and agreed to just stay far, far away from fluidic space. No kidding. And finally, coming in at our #1 spot, the Daleks.
Or would you rather just kill me?
Maximum extermination! Exterminate!
Maximum extermination. Yeah, and you thought they couldn't get any more exterminating. But of course they can, because of course our top spot, particularly when it comes to Doctor Who, goes to the ultimate villain and the most ravenously warlike species in the known universe, the Daleks. And despite all of their calamity and often goofy whisk-like technology, the Daleks always have been one of the most terrifying fictional species in sci-fi and horror, because again, of their implication. The Daleks are the complete antithesis of everything that is good and noble in all of time and space, and they were created with one purpose: to destroy everything and everyone that wasn't a Dalek too. Despite their appearance encased inside their metal shell, the Daleks were a species of genetically engineered mutants from the DNA of a species originally hailing from the planet Skaro. They were created by their ingenious overlord Davros, who sought to bring a 1,000-year nuclear war on his planet to an end by creating the perfect race of warriors. But he created them too perfect, and their eternal thirst for war, destruction and extermination later raged all across time and space, as he himself became a puppet and a prisoner of the Daleks. Honestly guys, the reason that the Daleks have been kicking around for so long is because their very ethos is what strikes fear in the hearts of humanity. It's the perfect alien villain, in the sense that it's the one thing we all hope isn't lingering somewhere out there in the vast cosmos of the universe. A bunch of highly advanced fleshy mutants in an impenetrable metal shell that can exterminate us like flies. Yeah, if that's the case, let's hope we've got a doctor.